Capturing the profound, sweeping history of an entire continent using only poetry sounds, well, almost impossible, right? But today, in this explainer, we're doing exactly that. We're going to trace this massive historical arc mapped out entirely in verse. We're going from deep ancestral pride, straight through the absolute devastation of colonial destruction, and finally arriving at this incredibly powerful rebirth. If you want to see how literature literally holds the soul of a people, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it.
So really think about it for a second. A continent is vast, its history incredibly complex. So how on earth do words on a page physically manifest the emotional journey of generations? It seems like a tall order. But as you'll see, through some wildly precise symbolism and clever allusions, a poet can distill centuries of lived experience into just a handful of lines. Let's break down exactly how this is done, act by act. All right, Act 1, the ancestral roots. I want you to just picture this. Vast, untouched savannas, zebras gathering peacefully at a watering hole. Beautiful, right? This establishes our baseline because look, before we can truly grasp the disruption of this history, we have to understand the foundation, that historical strength and harmony. The poet grounds us right in the land itself, basically setting the stage for the people who inhabit it.
Now, look at this specific line. Notice the deliberate use of the phrase proud warriors. Actually, scratch that. It's not just deliberate, it's absolutely crucial. The poet doesn't just say, people in the savannas. Proud warriors immediately sparks this sense of dignity, of sovereignty, and this deep, deep connection to the environment. But what's really going on beneath the surface here?
Well, you might be tempted to think proud warriors just describes physical appearance or maybe ancient military strength, but it's so much more than that. It represents a deep-rooted African strength and heritage. We're talking about a spiritual and cultural fortitude. It's the absolute bedrock of their identity, something that existed way, way before any external forces ever set foot on the continent.
Then, suddenly, the imagery shifts. We go from that sweeping macro landscape of the savanna to something so incredibly intimate. Africa of whom my grandmother sings. We zoom right in from these epic warriors to a single solitary voice in a family setting. And this introduces the mechanism of how this history is actually kept alive. It's not locked away in some dusty textbook. It is vocalized, it's shared, it's passed down. So the grandmother here, she serves as this incredibly potent symbol for family memories and cultural traditions. She's not representing government leaders or modern society. She is literally the living archive of cultural heritage. It's a great reminder that, long before the internet or formal history books, oral tradition was the ultimate preserver of ancestral pride. It's what kept the heritage of those proud warriors alive in the minds of the next generation. But then the circumstances drastically change. As we move into Act 2, the poetry takes a sharp, visceral turn. We're thrust right into the physicality of oppression. Is this your back that is bent? The tone completely shifts from pride and song to this stark, almost challenging question. The posture of the subject has completely flipped from the tall, standing warrior to a body that is being violently forced downward. This bent back is a vivid, vivid symbol of the oppression and the grueling hard labor forced upon the people during colonialism. The physical body of the continent's people essentially becomes a map of their subjugation. By focusing on the bent back, the poet makes the abstract, massive concept of colonialism intimately physical and agonizingly real for us to read. And guys, the imagery only gets more intense from here. We move from just a bent posture to active, physical wounding. This back trembling with red scars. Just listen to that word, trembling. It introduces this continuous, active state of pain and exhaustion. And the red scars, they provide this shocking splash of color against the text, pretty much forcing us to look directly at the violence inflicted upon the continent. These red scars are decoded here as the literal and figurative marks of colonial suffering. They are deep historical wounds, a permanent marking of history upon the people. But, and this is key, notice how the poem doesn't just leave the subject in a state of victimhood. It doesn't end there. The narrative pivots, forcing us to look at what this suffering actually produced. Which brings us to the ultimate sacrifice of this dark period, the blood of your sweat. Wow. It's a heavy, powerful combination, combining two bodily fluids directly associated with extreme exertion and life force. It tells us, in no uncertain terms, that the labor extracted wasn't just physical work. It was the literal draining of life. But here is the profound twist. This phrase suggests it wasn't just mindless exploitation. This immense suffering was the very element that contributed to Africa's survival. The continent didn't develop without immense sacrifice. The sheer endurance required to survive this era, it becomes a totally new kind of strength. It's a different type of warrior spirit than we saw back in Act 1, but honestly, perhaps an even more resilient one. Okay, entering Act 3, the turning of the tide. The symbol of blood is fully reclaimed here to transform suffering into something life-giving. Your beautiful black blood that irrigates the fields. Notice the adjective, beautiful there. What was a symbol of a brutal wound just a few lines ago is now being celebrated, and it irrigates, it nourishes, it grows, it sustains the very land itself. This specific phrase, black blood, symbolizes this enduring African identity and life force. It perfectly captures how the essence of the people is inextricably connected to the land. They are the life force keeping the continent alive, even through its absolute darkest chapters. Their identity literally cannot be separated from the soil they've worked. Now, in stark contrast to that vital, beautiful black blood, the poet drops in this incredibly clever allusion, amidst white and faded flowers. We've just moved from the potent red and black imagery of life and survival to something pale, weak, and dying. Faded flowers suggest something that, maybe once looked pretty, but completely lacks the deep roots needed to survive the changing seasons of history. So these faded flowers, they are a brilliant allusion to the colonial powers who are actively losing their influence. While the African life force continues to sustain and irrigate the fields, the imposed colonial structures are simply withering away. It's just a masterful use of color and nature symbolism to describe huge geopolitical shifts without ever once having to use political terminology. With that colonial influence fading out, we move to Act 4, rebirth and reflection. The poem introduces that tree there in splendid loneliness. It's isolated, sure, but that word splendid gives it so much majesty. It hasn't been knocked down. The solitary tree stands as the ultimate symbol of resilience. Think about it. After the historical storms have passed, the proud warriors of the past have endured the bent backs and the red scars, and they've somehow emerged as this deep-rooted, unshakable tree. It stands as a towering testament to survival. Which brings us to the concluding triumphant message of the explainer today. The poet points right to that resilient tree and says, that is your Africa springing up anew. It puts all the emphasis on a forward-looking perspective. The focus is no longer on the wounds of the past, but on the new growth. The tree isn't just surviving, it is springing up. That implies incredible energy, vitality, and a completely fresh start. So the narrative arc doesn't end in defeat. It ends with a profound theme of renewal. The poetry essentially drags us through the darkest valleys, specifically to show us the incredible height of the recovery on the other side. And now, looking at this, bathed in the warm, golden colors of a brilliant sunset, we see a true representation of an Africa springing up anew. Let's take a quick second to review the remarkable journey we've just decoded. To recap this whole explainer, we decoded the proud warriors representing unbreakable heritage, the strong back of oppressive labor, the red scars of deep historical wounds, and finally, the young tree, symbolizing pure resilience and a hopeful future. By isolating these specific symbols and allusions, we can see exactly how literature acts as a time capsule for a continent's soul. So I'm going to leave you with this thought today. Of all these powerful literary mechanisms used to reclaim cultural identity, which symbol did you find most interesting? Or better yet, if you had to choose a single symbol from nature to represent the hardest chapter of your own history, what would it be, and how would it eventually bloom? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep looking for the deeper meaning in the words around you.